Well, good morning, everyone. We thought we'd maybe have a little change of plans, and instead of splitting the group for discussion and then coming back together, we thought we'd just try it with one group, right? But take a break. So we discuss here for a while till 9:30 or so, and then take a break, and then come back together and discuss until it's time for lunch. That sounds reasonable there, everybody? Do we need another round of brief introductions, right? We have at least one new ad, right?
I see two.
Two?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's have a round of introductions, right? Just briefly, even less than 2 minutes, right? So I'm Susan Kipper, and I'm from KU in psychology and gerontology, and I'm one of the instigators of this shindig, right?
I'm Sharon Taylor. I'm doing PhD in the Department of Architecture at KU. I'm one of the 4 law students.
I'm Erin Smith, and I'm a PhD student here at KU in gerontology, and I'm also a senior market analyst at Gilmer Advertising and Marketing in Nexa.
I'm Amber Watts. I'm an assistant professor in clinical psychology, and I also am affiliated with the Gerontology Center here at KU.
I'm Royce Cabana. I'm from the King Med Center in Occupational Therapy and Education.
I'm Jessica Calendurich. I'm from the KU Med Center in the Atlanta Center on Aging, and one of the geriatricians.
I'm Ruth Van Ashley. I'm a full professor now in cognitive and clinical psychology here at the University of Kansas, and I'm the chair of the psych department.
Oh, I'm chair of sociology.
Well, there you go.
I'm from the University of Missouri, professor of sociology.
Susanna Siegel-Coates, professor of architecture at Kansas State University. Deborah Altus, I'm professor of human services at Washburn University, and I had the gerontology area of emphasis there, and I actually wear a couple of hats. I also run the undergraduate addiction counseling program, so busy.
I'm Rebecca Peterson. I am here from the University of Kansas, and my job as director of research collaborations is to bring together interdisciplinary teams to approach private foundations.
And I'm Gail Dole. I'm with the Center on Aging at Kansas State University.
I'm Colleen Largos, professor at the University of Missouri Columbia, and I direct graduate gerontology certificate program.
Marla Bergwager, St. Louis University School of Social Work, and I'm the executive director of the Geriatric Education Center in School of Medicine. Dayon Haley, I'm also at KU Med at the Lamb Center on Aging and Geriatrician.
I'm David Eckert. I'm sociology faculty here at KU, and I direct the Gerontology Center, and I'm also one of your hosts from KU today.
Stephanie Rivers. I'm with the Center for Aging at Washington University.
I'm Tom Muser. I direct the gerontology program at the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Well, actually, I'm professor of psychology at the University of Kansas, and I also have another hat. I work in the college developing online programs.
I'm Nicole Castro, second year graduate student here at KU in psychology and geriatrics.
I'm Cheryl Lester. I'm on the faculty of English and American Studies department, and I was formerly chair of American Studies. I participated in the initiative Find Those Cities, and as a combination of questions of housing and older adults.
I'm Jim Peters. I'm the director of the Ocean Lifelong Learning Institute here at KU, and we partner with K-State and Washburn, providing short courses, enrichment courses for seniors.
I'm Kelly Wright. I'm the assistant director of the Center on Aging and Community at UMKC, and co-founder and coordinator of the consortium on aging at UMKC.
So we spent probably some time yesterday talking about our ideas, the separate ideas that we've surfaced and we've generated for training students at undergraduate level, at graduate students to in aging. And now that we're pivoting to consider how we might not just collaborate with elders in the community and organizations in the community for the betterment of our students and our research projects, but now collaborate with each other, or as it were, piggyback on each other, or make the I-70 corridor a reality. And we outlined some questions here today, ways in which we could think about doing that. And at the bottom is the hardest one of all. How would we actually do it and sustain it? But what things are possible? What things would be beneficial for all of us? Consider these questions. Start off. Someone.
Can I just maybe start? You talk about a syllabus bank, which I think is a really great idea, not probably difficult to achieve. There's a project that goes way back called Merlot, as in wine, which was an online learning project that was set up in California amongst the various state schools there that brought together lots of learning objects and syllabi and lessons and kind of what works and what didn't. And I think I really like the idea of having some kind of central repository, because we heard some great examples yesterday of, like your example of having students go out and find the good place, the great good place, and just having those sorts of teachable moments or things that we can do, I think can really maybe move us along and also help cross-fertilize in different disciplines. So I really like that idea. How did you have a vision for that, or is it just a suggestion?
No, it was a note in a corner of a page. Was it your note? Or?
Could have been.
Yeah. We had a planning meeting and ideas went up.
In geriatrics medical education, the Reynolds Foundation has funded a lot of geriatrics medical education, and as a result of that, there is a website called POGOE, Portal for Online Geriatrics Education, and I think that I don't know if everybody's aware of it, but I think it's a format that people share their educational products. They're actually peer reviewed and then available for use.
I think this would be a very attractive idea, because a lot of us have struggled with how to develop either sort of in-class exercises that are very effective, suitable for students of different levels. Introductory classes, more advanced undergraduate classes, master's level classes. And people have done a lot of thinking and experimenting and tweaking, and so some of those tips and techniques, having them posted would, I think, be wonderful. But then some of these other ideas for these extramural kinds of activities, really building upon people's experiences with what works, right? Rather than, because I keep trying things and a lot of them I feel fail, and some idea of what might work would be very helpful.
Also, perhaps, I like the POGOE idea of having a broader scope, but I also like the idea of having a more local scope as well, because a lot of what will be successful will be local kinds of contacts that, for example, if someone at Washburn has made a contact with someone here in Kansas, I'm sure that would be a contact that we would be able to use here with you. So having local information as well in terms of...
And some of the agencies, you've developed contacts. Kathy, who must be in the other with Mark, has developed contacts with different agencies in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Might be good sites. There might, and they might welcome not just our students, but students from MU or Washburn or other places as potential visitors, aides, students.
Actually, let me add to that. Right now, we're working with UCCC and other institutions on our campus towards meeting a goal of fostering more service learning kinds of opportunities. And in fact, we've got a program called +1, which is you take a course maybe in a gerontology course or one of the other cycles like psychobathing, for example, and there's the student is supposed to be fostered in allowing them to do pretty hefty service commitment to some community organization. And this is going to be required for every student who graduates from the University of Kansas to do some kind of service activity and ethics activity. And this is going to be an easy one, or easier way than a lot of others, because the coursework in this area is actually not available. So we're going to have to find a way to provide these kinds of ethics and service learning training. And again, if there's organizations that can use some bright, smiley faces that are enthusiastic and willing to help and volunteer and low cost.
But it's also how to structure those activities and what they do, and so that it's more than just the friendly visitor or the smiley face in the context. And that's where I think a lot of us have worked those kinds of instructions and guidelines, the kind of critical thinking, the kind of reflection piece back out, but seeing what other people have done to turn it into something that an assessment tool, but also a sort of growth and educational tool.
Well, that's what I was going to mention, was the issue of assessment. We're, as I mentioned yesterday, revising our curriculum. And one of the things that we will be working on and need to be working on is an assessment tool, kind of maybe embedded in certain, but that would be something I think would be good to work on in the group.
So people would, if we build something, people would be willing to help populate it with syllabi and examples and handouts and materials, and it would just be, we would just make it available somehow or another. I don't know how these things are done, but.
One other model that we might want to look at, so the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented, is the Hartford Foundation funded $60, $70 million for social work programming around older adult issues, and they have Gero Ed Center has this whole very comprehensive site of syllabi and other kinds of teaching products that haven't been on there in a while.
So
it's a great model. So
there may be a lot of these, and again,
Right.
just
Right.
having some links
Right,
and knowing
yeah, right,
where to
right.
find one. There's one in psych of aging that the APA runs, but it has nobody's contributed to it very recently, as near as I can tell. But
Augie has resources too.
yeah. So even just building a site that lists some of these other ties and connections could be useful to all of us.
In fact, Augie has,
Oh, no, go ahead.
in fact, Augie has models, like if you're thinking about developing, say, interdisciplinary minor or a certificate program, they have models that are very helpful to use.
Now, are these, like Pogo E and Gero Ed, are they open to the public? I don't have to be a card carrying. Okay.
For some of them, you just have to have a free sign-in, so you have to track that's great.
Well, it also goes, I think, it also goes deeper than just what might be on the syllabus. So I might see on the syllabus, so for some exercise, we want you to go out and conduct a life review with an older person and write it up 1,000 words or something like that. There might be that might be in the syllabus. But what's not in the syllabus, and what I might want to issue a follow-up call to an individual, is that you actually prepare the students. I mean, the professor prepares the students for this experience, gets them ready, tells them about what might happen if they uncover problems, what if things become uncomfortable, how to get yourself into a setting, how to ask the proper permissions. And then, we were talking about this later, doing due diligence when the students come back, or from the organization, or come from the setting, to make sure that that there's a thorough interpretation, or there's a thorough, I don't know, deconstruction, or downloading, or interview about how this went. I might not know all these procedures. It might be second nature to clinical psychology professors and in the clinical professions, but I don't know how to prepare students to go wander out there. They're just going to they stumble through it, and that's where the point where I could call someone and say, so how do you do this?
So that's the kind of not just the syllabus, but the corollary material that goes along with the exercises about to try to prepare students, but also to try to do the assessments. So rubrics or whatever you might be using would also be helpful to others who are thinking of trying to adopt these forms of interactive learning.
If a site like this is built, I hope that a lot of that will be put into how it's organized, because I think that if it's not well organized, it won't be very useful. And so if there's, categories of syllabi and learning objects, that would be extremely helpful, I think, in making it a successful enterprise.
I think it will take a while to figure out the structure as people contribute and as we get some sense of what would be useful to different people.
One of the services that is available to faculty at our university is through the Center for Service Learning. I mentioned yesterday, they have a wonderful database and a person who's very helpful to students finding a site to go to. They have another staff member who her sole purpose for being there is to work with faculty on how to incorporate service learning into their courses, how to help the students do the reflections, all of that. She'll come to your class if you want and debrief with the students or do whatever you want her to do. And I wonder if other universities have that, and or is that something that could be helpful? And I know there's some sort of national organization that those people all belong to that might have their own website with all these resources already on it. I'm not sure about that.
Regional one is called Campus Compact.
Yes, that's it. I know
There are
I've heard
a lot of them springing up, but I think to keep the kind of focus on aging would be very useful. Certainly, when I've had conversations with our people, they have lots of ties and contacts to agencies and placement sites that serve children and families, and they're sort of taken aback that there might be another set of venues that they might be.
The nice thing about this person, the faculty support person, is it doesn't matter what the site is. She's just there to help with the process, and so maybe we could. If that doesn't exist at other universities, might be something people could help to do.
I think it's the spirit of educational innovation.
I don't want to be a naysayer on the syllabus sharing idea, but I'm going to be. And
We have to pay for yours? Or what is it?
No, and I think it's more from the perspective of collaboration. I mean, I think it's one thing to build a relatively static site that as an individual you choose to go to once in a while to find something. I think it's another thing to build a site that is actually interactive and collaborative, and where you can actually quantify within that the degree of collaboration. I mean, I think that's the part of this grant application about the I-70 corridor. We have to quantify collaboration, and so I'm not saying no to it. I just think that it's not as easy as it first sounds as you begin to think it through.
But that would be something good to talk with the tech people about how that kind of thing might be traced and how we might be able to automate some of that kind of thing, hits and that sort of download. But also to try to figure out a way to actually demonstrate its utility and impact on curricular changes or in courses or program development.
So one idea might be, we talked a little bit about interprofessional education yesterday. What if we developed a cross-university interprofessional working group, and they could build syllabi strategically to make certain points about aging that we think are universal, and maybe for undergraduate and graduate level in different disciplines.
It would be really helpful to me. I think we're at the point where the certificate program that I'm directing, we're talking about making it an interdisciplinary option. That would be very timely for me.
Tom, I think you bring up a really good point with using these types of tools on the internet, which is they can become very passive, and we're not. The strength of the internet is closing the loop. I mean, using the internet to teach is no different than using a chalkboard to teach. It just pushes information out in a different way. But where its real strength lies is if you can then use that tool to bring information back. In other words, if you're not just pushing out syllabi, but you're then bringing student work back into that site, or student reflections or some information on how effective these kinds of things have been that are then data, de-identified, all that good stuff, but then are then data to help improve practice, show efficacy of what's being done, provide stories for people to talk about what seems to work and what seems not to work, and show all the excellent work that people are doing in this area across the corridor.
But to me, that's where the advantage of working together, like on assessment tools,
Right.
on a rubric, so we're all kind of working from the same standard.
I was trying to bring it back to that, and I think that's a really important component of this. It can't just be a passive stream, it needs to also have that assessment piece built into it.
It would be nice to have a place where you could ask a question and get an immediate answer. Like sometimes I find, I'm going up against time to get a textbook, and I don't know what to get. And sometimes I've called Dave, Dave, help me, I need a textbook for this class. And sometimes he'll say, well, that's in my area or it's out of my area, I can't help you. And so it'd be really nice to be able to write that question to this group and say, help me find a textbook for X class.
I think another kind of useful function could be to help us all as we undergo our endless waves and waves of program review and assessment, to review syllabi. How could it be improved? What could be an additional module? How could you bring in the perspective of other kinds of professional disciplines or points of view? But also, how could you expand certificate programs? What would be the kind of components of a minor? How could you grow that? So it could have this sort of active element that we could help one another grow our programs, whether they're at the level of individual classes or at the level of all of these kinds of intermediate degree options and degree programs. Aggie has done something like that, but we can do it locally. But again, with an emphasis on trying to also build local options, local connections that benefit us all collectively.
And I want to give an example of that. In my certificate program, I require an interdisciplinary course, and Gail and I had breakfast together, and I was complimenting her on her course offerings because my students have taken many of her classes, and it's been such a joy to have that as a resource, and she has offerings year-round, so if I have a student who needs a summer course, they can find it in her program. So that's just an example of how this could work.
Yeah.
An interesting way to organize would be for us to think about goals and objectives for gerontology education. And then under those, I think yesterday we talked a lot about best practices. So within those goals and objectives, you could submit a lesson plan or something that would fit a good way to teach that particular objective. So that would be helpful to me. I like the idea of best practices even more than syllabi. I can look at a person's syllabi and not really feel like I'm getting anything out of it.
So perhaps we could get 2 or 3 of us together virtually, right? And sort of design something with some different modules. People could sort of volunteer to be editors of those different modules, like I hear Gail volunteering to be the best practices editor.
I was not going to speak up today.
And there'll be the syllable librarian or the right. We'll figure something out and get a prototype structured and then see what happens from there. Does that sound like a kind of a action plan of sorts? People will grow our mailing list and grow our connections.
I like the idea of just being exposed to I think there's a great value in just being exposed to the vitality of this. More and more my university is challenging me to change the way I teach. And maybe yours are too. Challenging you to change the way you teach. And I'm wondering constantly how to do that. And I've just, even now, seen ways that this meeting, yesterday's discussion, open up things that I should be doing Not everything I teach needs to involve the experience of older people. Social Security policy is maybe not something you discuss on the retail level, and I spend a lot of time on it. But I could really let go of those 5 hours that I devote to talking about family and interpersonal relationships and caregiving. I could let go of that in some way, to have that didactic content appear in some other way, and use some of the techniques that you have. It challenges me to step it up, just knowing that everyone else is doing it and trying it and innovating.
So everybody agrees to be an active participant and not just a passive viewer. Cheryl's going to give us her list of movies.
They're actually already on.
No, good. Okay, well, we'll find them, so wherever they live, right? But that's another problem for all of us. It's finding stuff. It's out there, but people know about different things, different sites.
So my curiosity with Cheryl is always, well, how do you teach a class on film? My class is 60 minutes long, and a film is 2 hours long. How do you do that, Cheryl? And you have a way.
Yes, well, what's evolved, I mean, the streaming has just been fantastic for this, because now I only use films that are streaming at the moment we're going to them, which has required a lot of agility, and it sometimes constrained the films that I've been able to choose in a given semester.
But you also know what to do after they watch the film, or maybe before they watch the film, which sort of befuddles me.
I was thinking, I mean, how great it would be to watch a film that would be of interest to a group like this together, and talk about how it can be used in various, like a virtual case in a lot of ways. And so streaming is the way to do it, because so students watch the films whenever they want, wherever they want, but then also it's very flexible for use in the classroom. You can find your way around it very, very easily, and isolate portions of it. And so to look at it, yeah, you can look at different frames or different scenes. So yeah, there's a tremendous amount of value in talking about film.
I'm trying to wonder if we should, to use Dave's word, to piggyback on existing social networking sites like LinkedIn or something, where they have groups where people already belong to, where you can post a topic, people can respond to that, and you can interact with that at your leisure when you have time, to the degree that you're able to do that. And so I don't know if there are groups that people already belong to, but I know I already belong to several of those, and so that's an easy way for me to have a place where it's already together. To get back to Deborah's comment about, if you wanted to post a question and you wanted somebody to respond quickly, where could you do that besides emailing everybody? And that's a way that, I'm already checking those things on a fairly regular basis anyway, so it's not going to be an extra email in my inbox. I can choose when I want to interact with that, but it's all in a common location so that everybody can see it who wants to participate when they want to participate. So I don't know what people think about that. I'm sure there are drawbacks to that as well. I know I belong to several groups that just never do anything, or that post so frequently that I start muting them because I can't keep up with
But I think we could develop something like that could have different possibilities and different kind of modules attached to it, where it could serve as a clearinghouse for information. People could post links or connections to it, but it could also serve this sort of purpose of helping us all develop, strengthen our teaching techniques.
And it takes advantage of existing infrastructure so that we don't have to invent something new.
We might be better off inventing something new rather than, but modeled after somebody's.
Sure.
I think we're also all worried about the flood of emails that are generated when these sites get picked up and so the spam starts coming in.
Well, and most of them you can modify the frequency, but yeah, there are a lot of excessive.
I'm curious, are there ever opportunities or interest in, your comment about wanting to show a movie to this group and kind of work through that, are there ever, in terms of being in person and being able to experience aspects of people's courses and, either work through them or, I don't know if that would be, I know there's scheduling and time and all these things that we all deal with, but is there any benefit to being able to actually not just see a syllabus or see it in person, but I don't know, once a year, being able to kind of experience a 2-hour portion of someone's course that would be able to not on to someone else's or.
Well, in some contexts, really, there's a push to videotape lectures, you know, and then have the students view them offline, right? And so some of us may be moving in that direction. And so there are these sort of master lectures that have, in some areas that have been posted.
Well, I mean, not just for students,
but
for.
Yeah, but it's also, you know, anybody could view it. So that might be another possibility.
Some of the activities that are more virtual, even your project, my second life one, and what you're talking about, because it's sort of modeled after Virginia, right? Using those virtual activities that have been created and passing those across university or keeping those for your university, but building off of what's already been created by another.
I think that, and so if we get a list, a sort of posting of your description of what you do, whatever might be required to access it, so that somebody could look at it and then
you know, and it would
grow or adapt
probably
it.
be like what you're saying, like it's not a static thing, so you probably like want to visit one of the activities or participate in that to see what it's like. Because I think if you just say, you know, here's a link and go to it, you're not gonna have a sense of what students are actually doing. So either having a conversation with the faculty that are engaged in or observing what happens, those things I think might be more useful. But we can at least have a identification of what the activity is.
Start out with just a library and then try to make it a little better from there.
We have a peer review teaching process at K-State that we're encouraged to use, and I haven't yet, but our emphasis at K-State is on inter-university collaboration as part of our 2025 goals. And I would think that if there was some sort of a peer review process, there aren't any other gerontologists really at K-State, a couple that I would think would understand aging content enough to be a good peer reviewer for me. But I think a peer review process, so we would have people come visit our classes or be put on PSOL, which is our Blackboard platform, would be kind of a cool thing that our universities would really value.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, review for a syllabi, but also of some of our degree programs or certificate programs.
But more than that, to your teaching styles.
Yes, and then grow it from there, I think would be, and enable some kind of, someone might try to implement the your second life caregiver scenario, but need some advice, some help, some feedback on it.
One of the resources we have at KU is the Center for Teaching Excellence, and they have a very lively teaching portfolio platform, and also lots of support for people who want to develop a representation of their teaching in all these different aspects that we've been talking about, and that already exists, and they provide a lot of support. It would be a great place for people to locate representations of their work.
I love Gail's point, though, that like I'm completely isolated at Washburn. I don't have peers that are doing gerontology, and so I need help from outside people. And so I can call on a peer reviewer from this group who would come and look at one of my classes or consult with me on how I could improve what's going on at Washburn and how I could get other people in my university involved and how I might be able to develop an interdisciplinary minor. I would so welcome that. And so if we could set up some sort of that kind of a process for those of us that are more isolated and don't have other gerontology resources at our own universities, we can do that.
If I could pose a question for a second, I'm listening very intently to what you're all saying, and I'm struck by this question of if you're able to leverage all of your resources together, how will you address gaps in training with the strength of that network. You know, how could we bring you together and approach a foundation or, you know, certainly cobble together other grant funding to create an infrastructure that helps you really to provide an interdisciplinary, engaged training environment for your students?
Well, I have a suggestion that I've talked to a few people about. I think we should think about a summer institute. So I'm most familiar with the Linguistic Society of America Summer Institutes that they founded, I don't know, 40 years ago, to do exactly that, to leverage resources nationally and now internationally to address gaps in training. The original framework was started out so they could bring people, experts and native speakers of obscure languages, so that to promote the study of those languages. But now it floats around from institution to institution. There's a long version that's 6 weeks, but then there are a lot of 1 week and 2 week versions. Students as well as faculty enroll in courses of different lengths that are taught by faculty experts in those areas. But it might, there are of course issues about making sure that students can get course credit, academic credit. There are issues about funding resources to not only pay for classroom space, but in most cases the students stay low cost in dorms on campuses that are otherwise partially empty over the summer. Most of the faculty are not paid. The ones that are offering longer courses, 6-week courses, do get paid, but not very much, I think. But it's a very popular and has proven to be a very good way of sort of building that field, that discipline. But we might think of a summer workshop series, right? Perhaps just starting out 2 or 3 days, a couple of different topics to address some of these gaps, some of these opportunities for cross-fertilization, for promoting interdisciplinary focus on gerontology. We don't all have the campus resources to offer something like an introduction to gerontology course or a master's level introduction to gerontology, but there might be interest and demand from our students to do that.
I'd be interested in that if I could tie credits on my campus to something that's joint.
Yes, I think that's the trick, to make sure that the students get credit and somehow pay some tuition dollars, so it might not be the full, you know, all those issues of out-of-state tuition and differential tuition and the public staggering complexity. But we might be able to try to develop something like that. So we could send our students who are from psychology, sociology kind of backgrounds primarily to learn a little bit about social work issues or OT, PT kinds of issues.
And there are a couple of models for that too. I know Rand in Los Angeles has a short summer workshop. They have something called a mini medical school, and then they also have something sort of about population aging. The NIA also has a summer program as well. So there's a couple of different models that we can draw from how they fund it, what kind of content they do.
And in a lot of sort of statistical areas, there are summer institute, summer workshops, again, on new techniques. And there are some different models, 1 week model, month-long model. But again, on some of these topics that we don't have the resources on our individual campuses, but we might be able to find resources in a collective sense.
I was just going to mention that at St. Louis Youth Georgia Education Center, we've been doing a summer institute for 25 years.
Oh.
This is the 25th year coming up. And Tom, I don't know how many years ago you
We've linked and actually tied in credits to that
Yes,
institute
and
for
so
about
that's,
10 years.
I think, been a really great partnership where his students come for the 2 days. We have things before and things
Yeah, we
after.
build classes on our own campus around
Right,
it.
but then they, they pay his tuition and then they
And
get.
they pay you too.
I know. A discount.
So what are the kinds of topics?
So last year, the theme was, get this in the right order, faints, falls, and frailty.
Say again?
Faints, falls, and frailty. I did not come up with that title.
It would be hard to say.
It was hard to say, that's why I had to pause.
It was also hard to understand.
It was, yes, and they love it. But this
Probably curious.
this has been, sort of an institutional tradition for obviously many years now, and it's a different theme every year. And so there's speakers, from the university, from the community. We have 4 people from Europe who came this year. We talked about things, that they were doing. And I think it's been a good model. Actually, we have more students from Tom's program than we do from our main person.
What about using that as a springboard? So if you were to do that at the beginning of the summer and combining it with the idea of engaged scholarship and service learning, you were able to almost use that as a launch pad to embed students in different environments that would help them with situational and on-site learning. Is that something that you find of interest? Is that something that meets your educational mission of service learning, perhaps, that's coming online more at KU?
Practical training. I mean, that's something I struggle with on a daily basis. I don't know if you guys do too, but I have a really hard time getting students good practical experiences. They go out and some of them have wonderful experiences and others end up serving coffee. And so I've often wondered if there was a way to set up a training site on my own campus, like an adult day program that's sort of modeled after the child care training sites that they have on many college campuses. And I know that there are people out there that are doing this, but it would be really nice to see if others shared that, interest and desire to see something like that happen.
I think there are some practical problems we're thinking about students because paying tuition or accommodation for kind of a short-term intensive experience is one thing, but if it requires a broader investment for accommodation particularly, it might be cost prohibitive for students unless we can find some way of providing that kind of subsidized.
Well, and I'll speak more specifically about what foundations might be approached with something like that, but certainly
I
foreshadow a bit. I mean, the Harvard Foundation, which you've already been talking about, part of their strategic grant making now is around practical training and trying to have more interdisciplinary training. So it's possible they might be a way of you experimenting with that.
So we might be able to have the summer institute, a 2 or 3 day sort of summer institute that then sets up a partnership with a particular site, right, where then the students go into that site and
or multiple sites in your own cities, right? So the students aren't necessarily dislocated.
Well, I think the key to that is, to get around the issue of one student having this amazing experience and the other one serving coffee, is having some standardization, some rubric can also be used for assessment to make sure that students are getting what they need to get from the
Well, we even have those rubrics and the students still serve coffee, so, it's
So there's, but some's falling apart there.
obviously, yeah. Well, it's the only person supervising this, it's kind of hard.
Well, and that would be one of those places where really sharing more about, going back to what was discussed earlier, about how best to structure these and best practices and that sort of thing might be more valuable than actually just moving from site to site an individual or student so that they can get, practicum training in a different city. Because I think one of the things that happens with our clinical program is that there's some degree to which we have control over what the practicum look like, and then there's some that are more distant from us, where there's less of that. And if you had some failures or successes with working with those more distant sites, we could be talking back and forth about what's working, how do you communicate, how do you try to press in a polite and effective way to bring a site around to doing the things you really need them to do for it to be an effective practice. That may be more of a sharing of best practices sort of thing than actually moving people from place to change. Because I know that we would probably have trouble counting practicum that were happening elsewhere in a very different discipline. APA may have something to say about that, I don't know. So that's where I would get kind of nervous. But I think we could certainly share best practices on that.
You make a really good point, though, that the ones, I don't think these are just geographical, but the ones that you have stronger relationship.
Yeah.
Like we have so many students that it's difficult to have a relationship with every single placement site, but collaboratively, we might be able to say, you have connections with 5 sites that are really excellent, you have connections with another 10, and I have connections with another. And so if we jointly then sort of talked about what those sites are, what
Yeah,
our strengths
I would
are,
love
and our students would be from different disciplines, but we would have those relationships that if I was having a problem, or you were having a problem, and your students were serving coffee at one of the sites that I have a relationship with, I can say, how can our students work more collaboratively together? How can we have a better experience?
Rate my
it
practicum.com.
wouldn't be all.
Well, and the other thing is, I know we have practicum sites that are underutilized that might be really good, and we've got more practicum sites that we know what to do with in some respects for a clinical PhD program. Not necessarily gerontology, but there might be some crossover, especially if we're thinking across discipline. And so again, if we were sharing that information more effectively, we would have a better chance. Because I feel guilty. There's some sites that really use our students, and we just don't have the people to put them. And if we were sharing that information, that would be really effective.
I wanted to just go back to the previous conversation about ways to bring some education to students. Dory and I are part of the Geriatric Education Center Faculty Scholar Program that actually the part I'm about to tell you about is run out of KU. It's a scholar program, a year-long program for faculty interested in expanding their expertise in aging, and every other Tuesday at noon there is an hour-long webinar. And the faculty from all over the country, there's 4 GECs that collaborate with this KU and SLUB, 2 of them. And Dory is actually a scholar in that program, but that's a great way, it's done through Adobe Connect, and that's a great way to deliver some really brief but intense kind of education.
I was thinking about that when the people that were talking about peer review,
Right.
and that's sort of an extension of that.
Right.
You actually have to develop a capstone project as part of this
Scholar program.
and it is collaborative. So they're bringing in all these different aging perspectives from people around the country that are experts in vast areas, and making you think differently about your own work. But then you also get to bounce ideas off of with the other scholars that are in the group and have sort of that peer mentorship.
So the actual technology of all this is run out of KU's GEC. Linda Redford and Dean Melling are, Dean especially, god of technology as far as I'm concerned. He's really the one that makes all of that work. And
I might have to go have a conversation with Linda.
I mean, this is the second cohort now, and actually we'll send information because we're recruiting for the next cohort. It's a 160-hour program for faculty members.
And then do you get a certificate, or
Yes.
you get some
And
gold star on your
yes,
forehead?
you get your gold star. So the other thing is that all of those webinars are archived and are available to anyone.
The capstone is a developing curriculum for quality improvement projects.
So there's a repository of the projects?
Oh, and yeah, we share those in our experiences.
Well, so I know Linda and Dean actually, when the application goes live, because they did this last year, I know they send it around to every university in Kansas and Missouri, which I'm very grateful that they do that. So stay tuned, because the problem is I don't know who it goes to. But I can certainly send it.
Never come across my.
Okay, well, I can.
webinars, but I didn't know about the faculty.
Okay, I will make sure, I can certainly, when the application goes live and we're just waiting on IRB from Roland, but I can send it to this group and make sure everybody knows. But it's all done virtually. I mean, I mentor a nursing faculty member from University of Missouri, and I actually have met her, but.
Who's actually taking one of my courses.
Yeah. But it's a wonderful program. I can't claim any credit for creating it, but it's a wonderful program. And those archived webinars could be available. We could link on whatever this site we're talking about creating. We could link, and everybody could use those to sign up for online classes or anything else.
Now, I'm losing track. Is this for professional development of faculty?
Yes.
Is this for continuing education for practitioners?
No.
Or is this for graduate students?
No, that's for professional development of faculty.
Okay.
So it's back to the earlier website for syllabi, course improvement, program improvement.
But I think also some of the comments about feeling isolated.
Yes, to broaden, to grow, to strengthen.
And the good news is the application is incredibly easy. Once it goes.
They have really excellent tech support to make.
Yes.
So the cost is in the infrastructure, so
So it's no cost to.
to the individual.
No, and there's, no. And every speaker is a volunteer.
So who are some of the speakers that
You've been? I've been. So we have a lot of physicians, because there's four GECs that are involved in this. Mount Sinai, Rowan School of Medicine, which is the New Jersey School of Medicine, KU, and St. Louis U. So we draw from people we know. So I recruited a couple of our physicians. When somebody's talking on transition, or she already talked on transitions of care, we did interprofessional geriatric assessment. This week, not one of my favorites, but it was treating infections. It was pretty specific, but we've had elder abuse, we've had, help me out.
Technology,
Technology. It's just, across the board.
The focus is geriatrics.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Our focus would be somewhat overlapping. But
Right. So some are very clinical, others are more educational.
David's kind of thing, Cheryl's kind of thing.
Right.
So we might be able to, I think that's a great idea that these technologies are just.
Right. As long as you have Dean, sign Dean up to help with this. I mean, he's a wizard. Make people have sound when previously have sound.
This problem of getting student from University A getting credit from University B and paying tuition back and forth. Now, Gail, you're involved in an online master's consortium, Great Plains Idea. It does gerontology, but it does other things as well. How does a student from K-State taking an online course from Iowa State get credit? Is there a contract that your university signs, or your university registrar agrees in advance to accept credit from this place, or?
Well, it's pretty specific to the consortium.
Yeah.
So there's one price, doesn't make any difference what school you apply to, you pay the same price for the class. But no, when you enroll at K-State, you can take any of those courses, and they have to be GP-IDEA courses if you're going to take them from another university.
They have to be, say that
The
again?
Great Plains Idea,
Okay.
that's the consortium. Although many times students will find online courses that they want to apply for that aren't part of that program, and that's okay too. It's all formulaic and way beyond me, but thank God somebody else worked on it.
So but for Summer Institute, it would either be, I think there's sort of two models. One is where they would get tuition credit, course credit, and the trick is to try to figure out how that could be done and across institution.
Probably the easiest way to do it would be to call it an independent study course, or give it as one of those, even a practicum number or something that.
Well, but they're sort of two entwined issues. If the students are in the same classroom and one is paying WashU private tuition for an independent independent study course, and the other is paying in-state KU public tuition for the same independent study course, and they ever got together and realized the tuition differential.
But universities do that all the time.
Yeah, so there must be these inter-university agreements.
Right, I worked in university administration for a number of years, and we have these agreements where our students actually, in social work, we've had a long-standing relationship with Washington U. Our students pay our tuition, they sign up for the course there, or UMSL, either one, and that's just known up front that obviously if a student from St. Louis U, a private institution, is going to UMSL, our students pay more tuition than they are at UMSL, but that's just
So
part of the
that's
deal.
the kind of thing I think it has to be worked
Right,
out.
right.
A different model is they don't get credit, but they just get the experience, the training, and that's how, what I'm familiar with, the Stats Institutes usually run. The students just pay tuition, but they're not getting credit back at their host institution.
You get like a certificate, but it's
Yeah,
not.
you get the training, but you don't get the necessary credit.
The course shell that I have is called Interdisciplinary Geriatric Care. Marla's conference is all about interdisciplinary, and we get around it simply by, there is no formal agreement
On that one, right.
on that one.
Right.
My students get a reduced rate to attend that conference. Of course, we're in the same town. I think if we're all convening on one place, we're going to have lodging and food and other logistical issues. But my students simply pay, so this is very clean and incredibly easy to do when you're in the same town.
Right.
And the universities have probably other overlapping and interconnected programs. But I was thinking of something that would be at KU one year, and MU Kansas City 1 year, and MU Columbia 1 year, and move on down the I-70 corridor the next year to, you guys could fight it out as to who wants to host it, right? So we could move up and down the I-70 corridor, taking advantage of campus resources for student housing and accommodation, and have faculty from the host campus and perhaps other the other program offering short courses. So there might be a psychology of aging short course and a sociology of the life course, right, that your students in Washburn might find very attractive because it would expand their educational opportunity, or an interprofessional assessment course or something that students from other non-professional tracks might find interesting as a supplemental form of instruction. So we could work on this too, right? It's going to take a little while to work out.
But in an online world, I mean, now here comes an objection. In an online world, why would I go to St. Louis to take a course when I could go to, travel to St. Louis to take a course when I could travel to, perhaps Texas or something, to take a course with an even more eminent person, or take it online? I could convince my students of the value of going and being in the environment with other students. But can we convince a funder that there's a human value in this?
Yes, because the value is in the connections that you make that then allow the research to get done, as opposed to just teaching. Not to undersell teaching, but part of this mission is to do research, to use teaching in a generative way to come up with ideas that will then turn into fundable and interesting and valuable proposals.
And I think of it was kind of thematically driven, and it's also connected to off-site visits to agencies, other kinds of placements. And those people are also part of the curriculum, who are out there on the front lines dealing with some of these issues as a way of enriching the academic experience. So there would be this kind of grounding in the local.
I wonder if there's a partnership that could be explored with businesses in the area
just in a minute.
So that, let's say students could not entirely afford a conference in St. Louis, but maybe there's an industry in St. Louis that has a focus on older adults, and that maybe people from that industry could also attend the conference and offset those costs for students.
Well, you could use a model that's used in the safety community, which is if you're running these kinds of conferences, which are often professional training conferences. Lifesavers is a good example. It's the biggest safety conference in the United States, and I serve organizing distracted driving stuff there. What's interesting about that conference is, there's a clear practical side in terms of training and outreach, but then there's also booths, right, where people are coming in and they're selling things and products that are often related to safety, and they sell a lot of booth space to a lot of folks. I would imagine that anyone in the silver industries that were mentioned yesterday, who understood that there were going to be a lot of professionals in this area, people that were interested, would love to come and have space to talk about their products or their services, or looking for partnerships. So there's a way to add that industry side in, while still, I've been surprised by this, while still maintaining the academic and research integrity of the conference. So those kinds of partnerships can be very valuable, and I will say that I have made partnerships with folks that have been on the industrial side that have turned out to be academically interesting. So it's good to bring that to the table.
I saw a documentary a few months ago that was interesting, talking about how they're, in aging specifically, that there's a kind of a truncation between the knowledge base in aging and what happens in industry among, industries that work or serve older adults or some aspect of aging. So I just wonder if what may be attractive to certain industry wouldn't only be, or maybe not necessarily be, oh, let me see if I, we can sell something here, but also an educational training opportunity.
It is, and there's also something else to consider. The only way to really get at the table for people that have knowledge is to make those connections earlier rather than later. If you allow industry to drive policy, you will be dismayed at what happens. On the other hand, if you bring them to the table sooner and try to form partnerships, you could have a much better opportunity to make evidence-based effective change in X, whatever your X is.
Yeah.
And so I think making that partnership attractive sooner is also to your benefit as an academic.
Right.
Because you don't end up seeing, oh God, here's someone selling this really horrible product, and I wish we could take it off the market, but there it is.
Well, and as a matter of fact, this documentary suggested that in some industry, they don't want the way they do business challenged.
That's right.
So in some ways, there's an impetus to kind of keep the knowledge base at bay.
There is.
So that kind of underscores what you're saying, to try to.
But there are always competitors who are looking for an edge, and if their edge is evidence-based practice and science-based practice and partnerships with people that really know what the hell they're doing, then those folks could make a good case that the product solution is a better one.
So we sell them something.
Exactly.
Another educational issue I think we should keep at the back of our minds at least is, we were talking about articulation agreements between universities. Many universities have articulation agreements with community colleges. And I think it's important for us to think about how, many students are doing these 2+2 programs. And if there's no gerontology education going on at the community college level, these students are showing up at universities in their junior year, and they're not prepped to be seeking out, gerontology minors or gerontology certificates or whatever. And so maybe at some point we want to include some community college partners in here to talk about how we can get some gerontology education going at that level.
Especially if you're looking at it from a job space perspective as well.
So I think we have a second task force forming here.
What is that task force title?
The Summer Institute Task Force. So there's the website task force, There's the Summer Institute Task Force. Do we have anyone wanting to bid for a third?
Well, there is a research section on this.
Yeah, I haven't mentioned that dirty little word yet.
Well, could we, before we move on to that, could we just talk aspirationally a little bit about training grant?
Okay.
What do these characteristically consist of, and how they're organized? I mean, I'm used to the model where a training grant for pre and postdoctoral education, now we're in graduate students, is given to a.
They can have undergraduates in them.
Okay.
Many of the ones in biology and chemistry have undergraduate.
They're typically single institution things, or they're single city things. We had this model of the Midwest Council for Social Research on Aging a long time ago, and it came to an end because of the single institution or single city imposition, especially funding from the national level. But is it possible to train pre-doctoral and postdoctoral students in aging? Not necessarily in gerontology, but it might be in their own disciplines, but with great aging competence using a training grant. If
there are such training for NIH grants available, I don't know if there are anybody doing training grants. Certainly would be.
At the moment, there's a problem.
It certainly would be possible, I think, to have a multi-site training grant where there are 1 or 2 or 3 awards on each campus with some, where those trainees then come together for a summer institute that might move from campus to campus, or other kinds of training activities. There was one that I know of, a consortium of Canadian universities that worked that way, that Bruce Schneider ran very successfully for at least 3 5-year funding cycles. So it was both campuses in Toronto, McMaster, and Calgary, and Edmonton, and Winnipeg, I think, maybe a couple others, Hamilton. So there were students on each campus that were at different levels that were appointed to the training grant, and then common programming that brought them all together in a midwinter training exercise and a summer training exercise. So I think there are models out there. It's just whether there's any money in the federal pipeline to support it.
Now, this is quite costly because if you have every trainee, you have to pay all of their tuition and pay them a stipend. Is it possible to pay partial stipends, partial tuition, partial thing? How did the Midwest Council operate, Jay? You were a postdoctoral trainee. You didn't? Did you? You got some money?
Some. Well, we didn't get any. I didn't get any tuition money. I was a faculty member at the time. But we did get, housing accommodation. There were small grants to help with our research. That was it. I think it largely depended upon the home university support. And then they participated with accommodations.
So the Summer Institute, if we could get it launched, the students would pay tuition plus have to pay for accommodations. If we try to find support through foundation or other funds to subsidize those expenses and to provide some sort of honorarium for the faculty, that could be an attractive option as a way of enabling students to really supplement their local resources. And it can be kind of thematically driven, so it can be tied to what are some of the particular strengths. So it's at MU, it might have a focus on the technology that Marjorie has developed. If it's at I don't know, K-State, it might have a focus on rural aging issues. And so it could have some of the different focus depending on where along the I-70 corridor it's taking place. So we need to see what we can do.
Well, why don't we take a break for perhaps a time, we've been at this for and move on to talk about research and the research block down there. And maybe reconvene in 15 minutes? Half an hour? Reconvene at 10:30. Okay.